Great. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody this morning to the Strategic CFO using cloud computing to change the game for finance. I think we'll start with quick introductions here while people are still trickling in. My name is Marc Linden. I am the CFO of Intacct. Intacct is a software provider of mid-market accounting financial management solutions, all delivered on a cloud computing platform. That's all we do is cloud computing. And I'm joined today by Jeff Haslow, one of our customers. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm the CFO of the Linden Group, and we provide data analytics and SaaS-based solutions for the hospitality industry. We have over 3,000 customers and 25,000 users, and we've been through a period of rapid growth over the last 8 years. But to handle that growth, we've moved our entire finance and accounting function, including budgeting, accounting, and others, to the cloud. And so we're completely virtual and completely in the cloud.
Great. Good. So I'm going to try to leave room at the end of the presentation, about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if you do have anything, I just ask that you hold it till we're finished with the formal presentation, because we have a chance we might answer it before we get there. But we will leave plenty of time at the end for you to ask anything that you have. So today we're going to cover a couple things. One, just want to go over some basics about what do we mean when we say cloud computing. Talk a little about the challenges we as finance professionals are facing, and spend the bulk of the time talking about how cloud computing, particularly a financial-based cloud computing solution, can help you meet those challenges. And Jeff's going to share his personal experience that he's had moving his organization to the cloud, and then a few thoughts at the end, and as I mentioned, plenty of time at the end for questions. So, whether we recognize it or not, most of us are familiar with cloud computing. Certainly in our consumer lives, we're using some cloud-based solution, whether it's shopping on Amazon, using Google, using an iPhone app, Facebook, whatever it is. Those are essentially cloud-based applications, which is really just simply an application that is delivered to you as the user using internet standards, where your primary interface is a web browser. So no software installed by you, no infrastructure that you need to worry about, basically just using internet standards. Now, what's changed, certainly in the last decade, accelerated considerably in the last couple of years, is those cloud-based applications are moving into our business lives. There's lots of leading applications. I'm sure most of you are familiar with some of them. Certainly Salesforce, Concur, Google Apps are making, headway into most organizations. And, I think, we're at a tipping point now where the primary delivery for new software applications is through some cloud-based delivery system. So this really is kind of the wave that's taking over the future, and increasingly the way that we're all going to be consuming business applications. So what does cloud computing really mean? What's it comprised of? Because as vendors, we do a great job obfuscating and confusing everybody. So I'm going to, just put a few foundation pieces in here so we know what we're talking about. So at the lowest level, there's infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service where you're buying through cloud-based application raw compute power. So Amazon Web Services, rack space. So you have some arbitrary application, you need to put it on a server somewhere. Rather than racking or having your IT team rack, hardware and bringing up that environment, you go buy it as a service from a third party. That's at a very low, basically hardware, low-level software level. Slightly above that is platform as a service. Platform as a service is where you're actually buying a development environment and you're developing an application, again, without having to build your own environment to do that, deploy development environment in your own software. You're doing that through a third party. Probably the best example of this is Force.com or EngineYard, for those of you that are familiar with guys that are developing iPhone apps, big users of EngineYard. Primarily for IT professionals writing some type of software. Now, at the highest level, and really what we're focusing on today, is software as a service. Software as a service is where you're consuming a business application, for your internal use, just purchasing it as a cloud-based solution without having to install that software yourself. Intacct is a cloud-based SaaS solution, And that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. So what does that mean for those of us as finance professionals? Those are great concepts for the IT team, but why is, CFOs and those of us in finance need to worry about it? Well, let me start by kind of going over some of the challenges that we're facing and, talk a little about how cloud computing and financial applications can help address those. So this is actually real survey data from one of our partners, Armanino McKenna. Armanino is the largest regional accounting firm in California, very focused on the tech sector, so has a lot of very leading clients. They do an annual survey of their CFO clientele, and they asked a very simple question last year, asked their clients, what do you do in your role? Where do you spend your time, and how would you like to spend your time? And what they found, and bar on the left is what the CFOs identified as their current role. CFOs are spending 60% of their time doing the basics of the finance function, just getting the transaction work done as scorekeepers in the organization, and basic control function, making sure that purchasing controls are in place, that that cash flow controls are in place, that the organization is, adhering to budget, whatever it is. About 60% of their time is spent on those day-to-day finance functions. Big chunk of their time is spent on providing analysis, and very little time is really spent by those CFOs on forward-looking activities, thinking about how they can help the organization grow and really driving the business forward and building value. Now, they also asked, how do you want to spend your time? And what they found was, completely inverted answer. Is it, we all want to spend our time doing the high leverage things and really helping the organization move forward. We want to recapture the time that we're spending dragged into that transactional world and just have it kind of, manage itself. And ideally, the consensus was, 10, 15% of our time should be spent as CFOs in particular, on the core transactional work of the department. And the rest really should be spent on the financial analysis and helping drive the organization forward. So where could you spend your time if you could free it up? Well, there's lots of things that you can do as a CFO, as a business accelerator. After all, it's one of the, usually only one of two roles in the organization that really has a global view of going on. It's really just the CEO and the CFO that are seeing all aspects of the organization. And CFOs in this survey said, look, they would much rather be spending their time doing long-range planning for new business acquisitions, planning for new business models, pricing strategies, supporting the business leaders in those more difficult forward-looking decisions, and being able to bring their unique financial view to that. But they were mired down in those day-to-day tasks. Now, interestingly enough, and this is from McKinsey & Company, talking about the expectations that third-party external constituencies have for the CFO. So this is your board, bankers, public markets, whatever. What they found is external expectations of the CFO are shifting in the same way. From very basic stage one, which is basically you're a transaction manager. Stage two, you're really controlling the business. Stage three, you're spending that time really providing insight for others and planning the future. But the ideal state, and where people are expecting CFOs in today's world to go, is being able to become business accelerators. And again, everybody wants to be here, where you're thinking about value creation for the organization, and you're an active member in the management team identifying new opportunities, not just in a reactive mode in your organization. Now, what are the problems with getting there? I mean, it's easy to say that, but the reality that we face day to day is you come in Monday morning, there's POs that need to be approved. So again, going back to the Armanino study, they asked what the impediments were and what the challenges were that CFOs were facing in making that transition to a more forward-looking role. And there's lots of them. That's exactly what you expect, that they're just spending time doing transactional work, managing budgets, processes are manual, data's in different places and not aggregated, systems aren't integrated, all the things that you would expect that we've all experienced in real life. Now, interestingly enough, when you look at, what are some of the tools that you can do to get out of this quagmire, if you think about, that one thing we all don't like to think about, which is changing out your core accounting system, if you embrace that concept, it actually turns out to be a huge lever in making this transformation to a more proactive stance, both personally in your role, in your time, but also for your department. And it directly addresses most of the challenges and impediments that were identified in this survey. So really, it's something new. Cloud computing, and I'll talk about it, helps you make that transition more accessible. But what we're really talking about today is the ability, using new technologies, to much more easily change your core financial management and accounting system and integrate it better into your business. So, how does that work? Well, I'm going to touch on 4 major benefits that you can get from cloud computing in the financial management area. So, boosting productivity in your core financial processes, providing better insight for decision making in more timely manner, focusing not just your resources, but the organization's resources on core things in the business that really matter, and then supporting your long-term growth. So those are all areas that we found through experience are the real sources of value in bringing cloud computing into your organization. So first want to talk about driving productivity improvements. So often said, hard to achieve, many cases not always the role just of the finance team, but in our experience, what we hear and see time and time again in these transitions is probably the single biggest source of benefit, time savings, and opportunity in the organization when you change your financial accounting system. And what we're really talking about is automating core, not just finance, but core business processes throughout the organization. So whether it's quote to cash, procure to pay, whether it's revenue management, just within finance, whether it's something as broad as time and expense reporting across the whole organization. It's those core business processes that you can directly address through automation with a modern financial management system that can really free up that time. The key here is you want to think process, and you want to think end-to-end process. So you don't want to just confine it to what happens in finance. You need to think throughout the organization and really think of it as that, that whole process flow. So quote to cash obviously is going to involve, the sales organization all the way through the finance team, and including potentially even your outside bank. So we use that as a quick example just, to illustrate what we're talking about. This is actually my quote to cash process in my prior life. It was just give you an idea what the underlying systems were. This was Big Machines quoting tool on top of Salesforce.com CRM, on top of Oracle Financials, big Oracle Financials in a manufacturing environment, complete with Agile BOM. So, lots of software, lots of money spent, lots and lots of time and effort put into automating and integrating the process and the systems. It never got there. It was still highly fragmented. The CRM system did not talk well with the finance system. We had hard manual rekeying between the front and the back end of the process, significant difficulties in configuration management, configuration planning, and basically all the symptoms you expect out of that. Lots of errors in the face of the customers, long DSOs because of that, and inventory management problems, and probably excess inventory because of that. So roll that forward to my quote to cash process today, different business, so thankfully, knock on wood, no longer physical inventory, it's all software delivered as a cloud, but still same underlying idea. And it's fully integrated. So the quote that a sales rep first provides to a customer becomes a source of truth, even though it's created in the CRM system. It is not something that, as a finance professional, I would bless as, core truth in the organization. That becomes a source of truth. It is carried all the way through to the actual contracted order with the customer that flows into our financial management system. Obviously, there's a finance review and becomes the basis for the invoice and rev rec schedules. There is never any rekeying. We have no sales ops department at all in the company. It just, the reps enter it once, keep it current, and that becomes a source all the way through the end of ultimately the collection process. Single price list. So no longer do we have problems where, see an order that comes in finance and say, well, what is that SKU? We don't sell that SKU. The sales guys made it up, or there was a different version of a price list that finance didn't know about yet. Single customer master. So if the customer exists in the finance system, that's the information that's used in the original quote. If it's new, the finance system knows that, automatically creates that new account. No reconciliation. So we don't worry about order errors anymore. We don't worry about correcting those in the face of a customer. That's all gone away. Huge savings. I mean, there's, whole roles and whole categories of roles that we've avoided investing in. And again, just taking that end-to-end process view. This was, non-trivial exercise, obviously, getting here, but well worth it. Great example of how you can drive those cost savings, through the automation, and again, just by driving a new financial management tool in the organization. So, want to turn a little to the second major benefit, which is improving the quality of information and the level of insight you have in your organization. Primary job of all of ours, as you saw from the Armanino data, where CFOs really do spend time and where they think they should spend time. But there's always room for improvement. And one of the really nice things about cloud computing, especially with financial information, is we as software vendors have finally delivered on the promise that we've been making for decades. I've been in the software industry a long time, of anytime, anywhere access to data. The way these applications are architected is that there is a single point of truth. That gives you real-time access to global information across the organization, regardless of where that data is entered. That's just part of the architecture of a cloud-based application. 24/7 availability. You get aggregated data. You get it in real time, even performance to plan, so you're not having to wait for an end of a financial close period to see where things stand. Obviously, if the information has not been entered yet, you can't tell, but there's a lot of real-time information that you can get, and you can report on it as you wish. And it's not just financial data. Certainly with the Intacct system, many modern GLs, you can take in operational data and statistical data and actually report on KPIs about the business, not just financial KPIs. So if you're running a hotel, you can report on room nights, utilization, effective dollars per room night, net profit per day by location. Lots of operational statistics you can get, again, using your financial management system in real time. And that is because you're dealing with the cloud architecture. So data sits in, at least logically, maybe not physically, but logically in one central database. You can access the application anywhere. Doesn't matter. You don't have to be on a VPN. You don't have to worry about remote access. The security takes advantage of standard internet security layers. All you need is an internet session and a browser, and you have access to the same level of information you have sitting in your office. So I was on the plane coming here yesterday in our financial system, doing a bunch of reporting and doing a bunch of approvals, just using the GoGo service on the plane. No security concerns, no remote access concerns. It's the exact same application access that I have sitting in my office in California. You cannot underestimate how powerful that is until you've really lived it. And that's not just for you, that's your whole team. So you don't have to worry about where the data is entered anymore. So Japanese subsidiary, right? Used to be Japanese office had their own accounting system, some local package, whatever. You got some upload to headquarters, maybe once a month if you're lucky, usually once a quarter. You get the file, something would be broken, you'd have to go back, get it fixed, day would go by, maybe two, you get a new file, you look at it, you open it up, and you start looking at what's there, and you can't figure out what is going on. You're not looking at transactional level data, you're not talking to someone in real time, and that kind of cycle can add huge delays in the close and huge delays in getting visibility into what's really going on in your business. Cloud computing, very different. Japanese subsidiaries literally using the same system that headquarters is. They're entering data in real time. It doesn't matter whether someone's in the office in Japan or not. You can come in, look at the data at the transactional level, obviously subject to permissions, but look at the transactional level and see what actually went on in real time immediately the next day. So if you start thinking about it, you can distribute your labor force any way you want. If you want to have a centralized finance group, great. If you want to have a distributed finance group that is just in your remote locations, or if you have a highly distributed organization, no problem. You can still sit in one location as a CFO and have global data visibility literally at the transaction level as fast as that data is entered. And you can have users in the system, doesn't matter, without worrying about license concurrency, without worrying about capacity, at the same time. So you can have a collaborative work environment where you have people entering transactions at a location that makes sense, maybe invoicing, whatever, in a local office, and then you have your core accounting function back at headquarters. So it gives you tremendous leverage in the business, and again, it's brought to you through the technologies underlying these cloud delivery vehicles, not anything that you have to worry about in your organization. So, what changes? Well, what changes is the old world where, Excel is your consolidation vehicle. You have a bunch of data in different silos and different operational systems, or maybe different regional financial systems that you really don't have a good way to suck out and report. So you're either, typically the default answer is you dump everything in Excel and report on it, or Excel becomes your database for operational metrics and KPIs, and the problem with that is it's not really accessible for anybody. It's kind of, by the time it's done, you're providing static late information. It's very manual and very error prone. Switch that to a system where the reporting is in the system, the data is global, and it's instantaneous, and you can start seeing some of the real benefits that you can get from that. Now, best part of that is you get all those benefits and you don't have to worry about the IT infrastructure at all. You're out of the IT business. So part of cloud computing is you're not just buying the software from the vendor, you're buying the operational environment to run that software. We run it for you, one central operation. Now, a lot of people get concerned about the quality of the IT organization from a cloud or SaaS vendor. You should be. It's a legitimate concern. It's definitely part of the diligence. But most viable vendors that are doing core business applications like an accounting application have a level of infrastructure that you otherwise can't afford unless you're a Fortune 500 or larger company. And the reason for that is we have one installation serving thousands and thousands of customers. We're spreading those costs across a very, very large customer base. And it's what we do for a living. This is not the finance department begging the IT folks for some time, to think about a financial system they don't really understand and don't want to have to manage. This is what we as vendors do for a living. Part of the service that we're offering is that operational service. So we take it very seriously. If we get it wrong, we're not going to survive as vendors. Customers will leave or not join. And so we spend a lot more time and focus on operational issues and IT continuity than you typically can in your own organizations. So I know countless times in my career I've put in disaster recovery in my plans and budgets and never actually deployed it because at the end of the day it always gets cut from as an optional long-term thing. to give you an example, Intacct includes full hot standby disaster recovery, complete second sight with live data for no additional fee. It's just part of the service. And that's because we're spreading the cost across this large base. So when you really look, we're running in Fortune 10 level data centers. We happen to run in the same data center that Yahoo uses. It's one of the large colo locations out in Silicon Valley. We're all running 24/7. We have top level disaster recovery plans, backup plans, and typically for a service that is mission critical are including full disaster recovery as part of the application. And you're not paying for it. I mean, you're paying for it over a broad base of users. So all the stuff that you're used to having to worry about or having an IT organization to worry about, which is all the actual building the hardware, making sure you have enough capacity, adding the middleware, running the software, doing version control, doing updates, all that goes away. And you're not worrying about it. You're letting the vendor do that. The vendor is delivering pursuant to an SLA. So all the downtime that we're typically used to with our finance system in practice really does go away. So you're not in the IT business anymore. And the way to think about this is you're kind of organizationally recapturing all that time and effort, because doing this to run a third-party accounting system makes no sense. Why should I spend a lot of time and effort in IT and accept the risk and downtime to run some third-party software just so I can get benefit of its use? Doesn't make sense. Cloud computing says, look, the vendor provides all this. All you're worrying about is that application access, and you're paying as you go. So you're not having to pay forward for licenses, forward for capacity. The vendor's taking care of all of that. So it's real data. This is from a Yankee group study. A little bit of a word of caution. So I get the question a lot, well, isn't it more expensive to buy this on an ongoing basis than, if I just pay for it once, build the IT infrastructure, and, I'm done, right? Yeah, there's maintenance, I got to upgrade things, and so what? I've paid for it once and I'm done and I own it. Well, the reality is when you actually do the math, pretty much every example I've ever seen, the cloud computing solution ends up being less expensive, not just in the short term, but in the long term. But it takes careful analysis. So because you're paying for not just the software, but you're paying for that operation service in your software as a service cloud computing fee, if you do a simple comparison of the price of a cloud application compared to an on-premises software package, it's going to look more expensive. You got to remember that in that cloud computing price is also all that operational infrastructure and all the internal IT costs and the cost of upgrading and maintaining and refreshing hardware and capacity planning and disaster recovery and all that good stuff that the vendor is providing as part of that service. So what the Yankee group found is in a traditional on-premises software installation, less than 10% of the total cost of running that solution is the actual software itself. The other 91% is hidden IT and organizational costs to support that third-party software internally. When you look at a cloud application, yeah, there's some hidden costs. There's training, there's implementation, you have to be cognizant, but most of that cost is apparent in the price. So, two takeaways from that. One is if you're comparing and you're doing a TCO analysis on-prem versus a cloud computing solution, you need to really be cognizant of all the costs and do an accurate comparison. But the good news is, in the cloud world, you actually pretty much know right away from the price you're paying what your total cost is. It's a lot more apparent and a lot easier to manage. Now, a little more subtle benefit. In the cloud computing world, because of the way we as vendors act, you actually get faster and better access to new functionality than you would in traditional software. So why is that? So first of all, the way we contract is typically an annual contract. So you renew every year. That means you don't like the software, you don't like the vendor, you have the right to walk away every year. So our economics don't work if customers leave. Typically a SaaS vendor is not making money until the second or third year of a customer relationship. So we spend a lot of time listening to what customers say and making sure they're happy, because 100% of the economics of a cloud business are driven by that renewal rate. And we want customers to keep using it, and so we build systems to listen very closely for that customer feedback. Now the good news is, because of the technologies that we use in developing the applications, we're in much better shape in our ability to take that feedback and turn it into features or new functionality in the software. Partly that's just because we're using modern tools for development, but partly because we only develop for one target customer ourselves. We have one team that operates the system, one team that builds the IT infrastructure, and that's us. So we're not having to worry about 5,000 different customers deploying this in their IT organizations with myriad different configurations and going through that whole QA cycle. That greatly simplifies the development task. So we listen really hard. We can incorporate features much more quickly. Again, using Intacct as an example, we do major feature releases every quarter. Typically, with a good on-premises traditional software release cycle, you're going to have a major release maybe every 18 months, sometimes every 2.5 years. So now the back end of that, we get these features in much more quickly. That feature, once deployed, since we're just deploying to our own internal development environment, our own internal operational environment, that feature is available for you to use as soon as you're ready to use it. You don't have to go through an upgrade cycle. So what happens is, most companies don't upgrade the second a new release comes out. They wait a year because they want all the bug fixes, and they don't have time. They have to schedule it. So between the vendor cycle and that upgrade cycle, you're talking 2.5, 3 years from asking for a new feature to getting the benefit of a new feature. That turns into months or quarters in the cloud computing world. So again, imagine if you conceive of these ideas, the world changes, something new comes up, you get that new functionality that much faster. Huge improvement in the software that you're using in your organization. Now, lastly, we're taking care of the future for you. So one of the things that I've learned, and this is my 4th time around just as a software CFO, businesses change and they grow. They grow in scale because you have more transactions, you go into new geographies, new currencies, you acquire companies, whatever it is, and they grow in complexity along with that. More product, more customers, new processes, channels, whatever. Planning for that growth is often difficult, expensive, and can be very disruptive in your organization, because that's where you find hard things. That system's not going to scale. Or, wow, I bought a company that has a completely different set of software infrastructure. What do I do now? In cloud computing, that burden and that risk and that cost of forward planning falls back to the vendor. And you don't have to worry about it as much. And it's a lot easier to accommodate discontinuous change in that environment than if you're running the software yourself. It also is an environment where you don't have to worry as much about what systems you're using. So part of the promise of cloud computing is the ability to pick best-of-breed applications, and that's because through new software technologies like web services, APIs, integrations are much easier to accomplish. And a lot of that burden is now taken on by the vendor. So the old world, and which I in my past might have been part of, vendors encourage integration. It's really simple. Yes, of course we have APIs. You can integrate with anything else. But by the way, you have to pay for that. Typically, you have to do it with your own internal organization. And if there's an upgrade cycle, well, that's integration. You're responsible for it, Mr. Customer. You better take care of the upgrades. And we don't guarantee that things won't break. So if you have to rewrite your integration, that's your problem. That's not how the world of cloud computing works. These are applications that are designed to integrate, that are deeply invested in the APIs, and again, with simpler technologies. In many cases, the vendors are cooperating and building predefined connectors to each other's systems. And there's actually a whole layer of third parties that provide integration layers between leading SaaS applications. So the risk of an integration and the cost of it has really gone down. And this is now something that you can kind of freely embrace, whether it's to another SaaS application or even an on-premises solution or a proprietary in-house solution. It doesn't matter. Integration really becomes the norm rather than the exception. So you can not have to worry about planning a system map 3, 4, 5 years down the road. You can really pick and choose as the need arises in your organization. So I mentioned scale. So really, a lot of people get concerned about the SaaS vendor and cloud vendors. Can you handle my level of transactions? Can you grow with me? So the way to think about this is we're planning across thousands of customers. So the level of scaling problem that we deal with is far beyond the level of scaling problem any one of our customers is typically going to address. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, right? It's software, the way you find out about a software scaling problem is when it stops working. They're hard to anticipate. But generally speaking, the problems that we're solving for in scaling the whole business are far beyond what any one customer is going to have to deal with. So we're in a far better position. And then we're the ones absorbing the cost of that. So you don't have to buy excess capacity. You don't have to buy forward licenses. You're really paying for this as you go. Part and parcel of cloud computing is typically a flexible licensing model where you're paying based on users as you need to add users or decrease users, something you can never do in an on-prem traditional licensing model. And typically where you can buy functionality as you need it. You don't have to sign up for everything day one. You can add functionality as it becomes important for you through an optional module. So again, much less risk, vendor thinking about it at a different level, order of magnitude, and much lower cost as you grow your business. So, great example, acquisition. Typically what happens is they have their own GL package. You're faced with this system where now you've got two, they don't talk to each other, you're forced into manual consolidation, you're forced into manual aggregated reporting. Maybe you can get some kind of monthly upload from the subsidiary system into your headquarters system and try to report that way, but you're not getting transactional drill down. Cloud-based environment, add a new subsidiary, literally 10 to 15 minutes in our system. The cost of transition, very little, maybe 3-4 weeks of professional services work. So you really do have an environment where it's much easier to handle that kind of unexpected, and where the vendor is really taking on a lot of that risk in their software. So with that, let me turn it to Jeff, who's going to share his personal experiences.
Thank you, Marc. Marc did a great job of talking about the benefits at the end. I'd like to talk briefly about the process of how we got there. Because as I said in my introduction, we moved our entire finance and accounting platform to the cloud, including the piece that is our accounting on Intacct. A lot of you are probably from smaller companies or have worked in smaller companies, startups, or nonprofits. Changing your core financials is a scary prospect because you don't feel you have the resources to help you and you don't think that you can get it done. And an old Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, I think is very appropriate. And Marc's salespeople will probably shoot me for saying this, but we started a year and a half before we even knew that we were going to be signing a contract with Intacct as the core. Just doing things like getting your charts of accounts between different entities if you have multi-entity situations that don't talk to each other, standardizing your chart of accounts and getting your people used to using them, standardizing your processes. going through and eliminating old vendors, old customers, cleaning up your data, getting your data as clean as it possibly can be, knowing that you're going to have to convert it to a new system. Then we started looking at the different vendors that we wanted to use. We did look at different cloud-based accounting systems, budgeting systems, payroll, credit card processing, and banking. And we started switching to vendors that were able to use or integrate with the cloud-based solutions that we were picking. Moved to Silicon Valley Bank. While we were going through this process, had them start working on an integration where they could upload all of our invoices and invoice payments directly into Intacct. And we ultimately did that at kind of a full day person's time off the table a week. Switched our payroll to a company that would integrate. We switched to ADP that would integrate with Intacct. I started using adaptive planning as my budgeting and software. It was a very flexible tool all by itself, but I also knew in the end it was going to integrate with Intacct once we had Intacct up. Plus it gave me time to get in there, get our management team used to using it, get me used to using it, and get it exactly the way that I wanted it to be and on the standardized chart of accounts that we developed. So as we converged all of this, I also put different people on the team because, again, you're dealing with limited resources. My controller was in charge of the accounting project, and she managed her resources as she needed to with Intacct. I took the budgeting. Our billing person looked at the specific billing part of Intacct, and our cash receipts person talked to the bank and the credit card processor about what they needed. So they had ownership, and they helped build those systems and put the systems together in preparation for bringing everything together. Then once we got on Intacct and we knew that we were up and running, we used a sandbox environment that they do provide so that we could test how are things going to work in our purchasing flow, how are things going to work if we do this import in a perfectly neutral environment that wasn't going to affect our core financials, so that we knew what was going to happen when we went live. And I'm not a big parallel processor type of person when I do systems conversions, because it's a lot of, you end up reconciling with two systems that you're not even going to use anymore, and you waste all your time reconciling instead of seeing if the new system works. So the sandbox environment was another big key component of making sure we could do what we wanted to do when we went live. We didn't bring everything onto Intacct all at the same time. We brought Intacct up first. We made sure we could bill on Intacct. We have at the time, we had over 2,000 customers. We now have over 3,000 customers that we bill on a monthly basis. So that was a big component. So the first thing we did was run a monthly billing on Intacct before we did anything else. Despite a hurricane, a controller that had her baby 3 weeks early, and other issues, we were able to do it because we were able to work, as Marc said, virtually and remotely. When the hurricane, my accounting staff is at the Atlantic Shore. They work in a small beach town in Delaware. They were getting hit by a hurricane the week that we were going live on Intacct and had to bill all of our customers. Huge cash flow impact if I can't bill those customers, customer dissatisfaction, et cetera, et cetera. We moved them to another office. We didn't have to bring any equipment. We went on computers, logged on to Intacct, and kept moving. Behind that, as we went along, then we started bringing all the other systems online, and ultimately cut down on our audit fees and our accounting fees because they're able to access the system remotely as well. They're located in DC, and again, my accounting team is located in Delaware. Some of the benefits Marc mentioned that I experienced even at this conference is that I can go online, I check my cash balances, look at the dashboards, I see what my managers are doing as we're rolling budgets, so that we're already adding a quarter right now, seeing what they're doing, and I can do it all from sitting right here. I just got the 5-minute mark, so I better sit down and let you ask questions. But that's it in a nutshell.
Let me get this back up. So let me just do a couple wrap-up words here, and then I'll leave a few minutes for questions. So again, what we're talking about here is, really embracing that change of your core accounting system and making it more accessible. So a lot of the benefits that I've touched on, are part and parcel of any new system automation project. Process improvement, certainly, some of the other things. I think what's different is that cloud computing makes that much more accessible and really delivers on some of these promises that have been made, certainly the reality of getting data wherever you want it. But it also lowers your costs, lowers your risk, and when you actually get into a deep discussion, the process of the implementation is much easier than a traditional change to an ERP system. So it really makes it a primary lever that you should think about in achieving that kind of forward-looking stance in your role in your department. So I'm not going to go through this, but I'm often asked, how do I know when it's time to switch? I've just put a couple of thought starter questions here that are in the presentation for you to refer to if anybody would like to. And with that, let me leave a couple minutes for questions. Yeah?
For Jeff, how did you get your auditors on the system without a license?
They actually, you buy per user, and there's different types of users. There's your full accounting users. There's what's called financial users that are read-only reporting users, and that's what I use for my manager's dashboards. And then there's employee users who use it for time and expenses and other minor things that they may be doing, or lower-level managers that are part of the approval process and a purchasing flow. But the auditors had a read-only financial license, which was a cheaper license. And it was very helpful for them. And they could actually, they had a sampling program that they could use to pull samples right out of the data without even, another benefit of Intacct is you can attach electronic documents, so they didn't even have to ask us for the documents. They just looked at what was attached to the transaction they selected.
How large is your organization?
We have 150 employees, and we have, as I said, 3,000 customers and 25,000 users on our platform.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we're seeing a lot of the move to cloud-based applications, primarily in mid-market. This is still a mid-market financial application we're talking about, and a lot of the applications are, they're relatively large business, software apps. But it brings, one of the benefits of the economics is it brings kind of a true enterprise level of functionality to a much smaller organization. And it makes it much more affordable to really do some of these deep automation projects. Absolutely. So I know, in our case, we completely run our whole business on cloud apps. And Jeff, I think you're there. We do as well.
And it's a great ROI presentation to your CEO, because we grew, in the time that we were doing this, we grew 75% and started bringing on our first outside investor. So we were going through due diligence, going through systems conversions, and the company was growing very rapidly, but I did not have to increase the size of my staff. Right. We handled the growth. We were able to provide the data to the investors and do everything else we were supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis.
So I've quintupled revenue and added 50% to staff. So.
And it sounds like you did a lot of pre-work before you actually signed it.
Absolutely.
How long did it take you from the time that you signed the Intacct until you were operational? Even with
we signed the contract in May. We started working with the professional services group on a regular basis for the implementation in the third week of June, and we billed at the end of August.
That's pretty typical. It's, we basically say, 2 to 4 months, and it really depends on how organized you are in getting your data and, GL structures in place.
Which is all that pre-work, and that's...
We have time for one more question.
So over the past few years, what sort of adoption rate have you seen? What sort of adoption rate have you seen? And the company that one of the top few reasons why they won't adopt.
So what we've seen is it used to be customers would come in with a list of, 2 or 3 traditional software packages they were looking at and say, well, we've heard about this cloud stuff. We thought maybe we should take a look. To now, in every case, there's a minimum of at least a cloud vendor being considered in that list. And many, many customers are walking in saying, I'm only looking at cloud-based solutions. We really, to be honest, our win rate against traditional software is 90+% these days because of that. The reasons that people don't buy is inertia, and that's kind of why the tenor of this is it's a scary decision, right? And it's a risky decision for CFO to do this. And there really is a lot less risk when you get into really looking at what these projects now entail. Okay, great. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and appreciate it.